Rappin with ReefBum is sponsored by Bulk Reef Supply and Ecotech Marine.
Hey, welcome back everybody to another episode of Rappin with ReefBum. I'm your host, Keith Berkelhamer. Well, on today's live stream, and I wasn't sure we were going to actually get this thing off the ground because we were technically challenged, but more about that in a little bit. But we're reconvening the RB3 group here once again. Reef Beef, Reef Brite, and ReefBum. And so we have the beefers, Ben and Rich, as well as Tullio from Reef Brite. And so I also saw somebody on Instagram refer to the this meetup as Beef Brite. So that's a
Beef Brite.
What's going on, fellas?
Not much. In traffic.
Yeah, so we got Mr. Ben Johnson there who's actually driving. So and I'm not sure if we're gonna be if you're gonna be staying connected with us or not. But yeah, don't be looking at us there, Ben. Keep your eyes on the road, dude.
Not moving.
All right. So what's going on here tonight? You know what? We had this group convene last year, and I wasn't even sure why we had convened this group last year. It was kind of like an odd pairing, but it was Tullio's idea. So you know, we had a lot of.
You get to listening to me, Keith.
Yeah. You know, so I think we had a lot of fun the last go around. I was like, why not? Let's bring back the this quartet again here to talk on the live stream, and you know, but in all seriousness, each of these guys here has a very interesting background and perspective, and I think we have a lot to talk about on a number of different topics. But before we get into it, let me just introduce these guys in case you don't know who they are. Rich Ross has worked in the aquarium industry and trade for many years. He was a Master Aquarist of the Year, has spoken at industry conferences, including MACNA, written articles about the hobby, and has done some groundbreaking research. He also has a coral lab at home, which is really cool. Ben Johnson. Ben is an aquarium maintenance guru who has many types of clients. The name of his company is Captive Aquatic Ecosystems, and it's based in Houston, Texas. Ben has also spoken at MACNA and at Aquashella. Both Ben and Rich co-host the Reef Beef podcast on YouTube, And if you haven't, you should definitely check them out. They partake in some very informative and entertaining discussions about reef keeping. Tullio, I don't know if Tullio needs an introduction or not, but Tullio Dellaquila from Reef Brite is he's also a guru. So we've got two gurus on this live stream. He's a lighting guru. He's an expert, and he's spoken at many industry trade shows about lighting. But before we talk with the guys, wanted to thank the sponsors for the show, Bulk Reef Supply and Ecotech Marine. I really appreciate these companies supporting the show, and I also appreciate all you folks tuning in. There's a lot of you folks out there. Hey, Great Bearded Reef Paul, man, thank you very much for the super chat. First beer is on me, he says. Yeah, so as per usual, we'd like to make this a very interactive discussion. So drop your comments in the chat, your questions in the chat. Love to see those questions. And so, given Tullio's expertise with lighting, I thought we would lean on that topic during the discussion tonight, but we can certainly get into other stuff if that's where the wind kind of takes us. So, but I thought it'd be kind of interesting to start with a little ice-breaking question for each of you guys, and I think, Ben, this is going to take you by surprise since we just added you to the Skype call, and but I don't know. I thought it would be fun for each one of us to tell a fun fact about ourselves that has nothing to do with reef keeping. And I'll start. So when I was back in college, I was a caddy. And one time I caddied for Ivan Lendl, who I believe at that time was the #1 tennis player in the world. And I drove the golf cart for Ivan Lendl because the golf club, the country club, did not trust Ivan to drive that golf cart because I think he had wrecked a few. So that is my little fun fact. And Tullio, you want to go next?
I guess non-reef related. Well, I'm an amateur radio operator, and for example, just the other day I spoke to a gentleman off of he was in an island off of South America. So I speak to people all over the world with this thing called an antenna and a microphone, and pretty fascinating.
Oh, so
stuff.
is that like a ham radio operator? Is that what you're doing?
Yeah.
And, wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know there's still guys doing that.
Yeah, I didn't either, but apparently there are, because there's this guy in this isolated island somewhere, and I was talking to him, and so yeah, it was lots of fun.
Ben, fun fact about yourself, non-reef related.
I have two fun facts. One fun fact is that I've never done a podcast while stuck in traffic, and a second fun fact is I had childhood epilepsy, and it went away when I was 8. And then out of high school, I tried to join the U.S. Marine Corps, and they were shrinking the military, and it kept me out, though I wanted to be in. So there.
Wow, that's a few fun facts. All right, Rich, man, what about you? You got a lot to choose from, I would think.
Before I was a biologist and before I was a stay-at-home dad, I was a juggler. I was a comedy corporate juggler for 15 years. And next Thursday, I'm doing the first show I've done in like 6 years with my old partner. So that should be really fun. I haven't done a juggling show in a long time. Looking forward to it.
Very cool. Very cool. Can we catch any of the juggling on YouTube, or is that...
I don't know. I will probably set up a camera just for fun because that's easier than it used to be. But this is a fair out in Cloverdale, so it's not. I don't think there's any live streaming from Cloverdale.
I think I still have a clip, Rich, when you did it at Macna with Sanjay. I think that might have been the last time you guys did an official show.
Yeah, I think so. That was Vegas, and I did that with Michael Joe. Yeah, that was really fun. Yeah, I think that was the last show I've juggled at. Yep.
That was awesome.
Thank you.
All right. So let's move on to some reef keeping topics. And so the first topic that I want to start off with is really one of the main reasons why I wanted to bring you guys all together again to discuss this. And this is an issue that's been brought up before on my live stream, and I know others have brought it up in other live streams, and maybe others have brought it up in just plain old videos, and maybe you guys, Ben and Rich, have discussed it on Reef Beef. But so Tullio, you visited both Mike Paletta at his house and Chris Meckley at ASA Aquaculture in Florida, and you brought your spectrometer, right?
Yes.
So Mike had been having some issues with RTN and STN in his tank with his corals, and Chris was also having some issues with his corals. I think it had more to do with the LPS in his systems not being happy. So Tullio, my understanding in both cases is that, and they were running LEDs under these tanks, is that you found little to no UV light that penetrated down to the corals. Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
So the manufacturers, I guess, of these lights, and we're not going to get into the specific lights, I guess, at this point in time, but the manufacturer of these lights say that there is UV light, but the test revealed that there was very little UV light that did make it down to the corals. And Mike was wondering, whether the lack of UV light in tanks lit by LEDs is contributing to more pathogens that can cause RTN or STN. And so Mike's solution was to add some halides to his tank to supplement the LEDs, and Chris did the same thing. And I know Chris's situation turned around after he added some halides. I'm not exactly sure what was going on, if Mike was able to turn things around or not. Maybe you would know that Tullio. But so Tullio, can you discuss this? And I'd love to get Ben and Rich to chime in at some point in time. But go ahead.
It's been an interesting topic because and I've said this to both Chris and I've said this to both Mike Paletta, is that we have to avoid what I call the absolutes, meaning that, Rich, I'll bring you in here. Listen, radions, which are awesome lights. There's no doubt the success that people have had growing corals under radion lights. There's no questioning. We have record of this, over years of everybody from the worldwide corals and the people using the radions. We have great progress, and even other lights with LEDs. So again, it's a matter of perspective, meaning that I guess depending on how we look at it, we could also say that because of the prolonged use of many of these LED systems, have we demonstrated that corals can actually thrive without UV? Okay, because again, many of these corals wouldn't necessarily be exposed to UV in the wild. It depends on the coral, right, Rich? There's so many factors, so we want to avoid that. But here's the interesting thing with Paletta's system. Is there action on the UV side for certain things? I'll get to that in a moment. But when I was at the Biosphere and when I was doing a lot of the other testing, what I think people are going to find interesting is I think it's more the red and the green wavelengths, which I know is contrary to a lot of people's, let's say, beliefs. But I think that it's actually a lot of the red and the green wavelengths that have actually showed, that's where a lot of the benefit, let's say, is necessarily coming from. Because the halides that Mike Paletta is running, I know because I sent it to him, those halides are producing, again, little or no UV. I purposefully control the amount of UV emissions from that fixture, and I told Mike this so that we could rule UV out, and that if there was any type of difference or whatever, we could most likely contribute that to, let's say, the longer wavelengths of light and not necessarily the UV.
So, Rich, you're a biologist, and you've written articles on, a series of articles on skeptical reef keeping. What are your thoughts on this topic? Do you think that there is some plausibility in terms of what Mike's theory is?
Tell me the theory again.
Basically, what Mike is saying is that the lack of UV is going to the lack of UV light in LEDs is going to help to contribute to more pathogens that could cause RTN and STN.
Boy, that's going to be a hard one to support. I think there are just too many successful tanks that aren't running UV nowadays anyway. And then of course we're going to have to talk about which UV we're talking about.
Well, Rich, we're talking about UV coming out of LEDs. So what what Mike is saying is that the lack of UV that's coming out of the LEDs that's penetrating to corals, is that something that's allowing more pathogens to cause the the stress among corals?
I think that's a hard one to support. I think there's just too many. I mean, in a couple of systems I've spawned Acropora under LED. So and often reproduction is one of the hallmarks of success of captive keeping of animals. So it's going to be hard for me to say the lack of UV there is in the LEDs I was using or am currently using is causing any kind of problem. I think before, when I was using halides, I had more RTN happening than I do since the switch to LEDs. I haven't had any real, like big RTN events like I used to have every spring in 5 or 6 years. So it's one of those things that sounds like it might make sense, but I think it'd be really hard to support. And then the worry for me is we're going to get people throwing UV on top of their tanks again, like they did in 2005 and like they did in 95, and kill all their corals because they really don't get that much UV to start with anyway. So UV gets attenuated really quickly. So
that's why I wanted to be so cautious about this. Now, I will say this. So, for example, Rich, certain corals, SPS and otherwise, they spend X amount of hours completely out of the water where they're exposed to direct sunlight.
Some do in some locales.
Yeah.
It's not as widespread as a lot of people seem to think it is, but with that caveat, yes. But
the theory started with that. Let's say like an STN, RTN. Let's say like an STN, right? If it's flesh based, okay. There was some curiosity of exposure to, let's say, certain wavelengths of UV could be an effective treatment. Now, here's where things get interesting. And Rich, it may have nothing to do with aquariums, but okay, so remember, Rich, I was explaining how we were working with the penguins and the sea turtles and all these things with these different actions and vitamin D and all these other things. Well, we've also been monitoring Asper counts. You're familiar with Asper counts and what that means and things like that, right? We actually just got testing back. We're using, get this, Rich, using UVA and UVB only, no UVC. Using UVA and UVB, we have lab certified tests showing that we effectively killed at a 99.9% effective rate H1N1, which is your whatever flu that is, the H1N1, and E. coli. So UV, and here's where we got to be careful, guys. Like Rich said, no, anyone watching this, you do not want to put UV over your tanks, especially unmanaged. And so, no, the lights are fine. You don't, that's why I would like to look further into this. But at the same token, I don't want people just putting UV over their tanks because it can be very, very bad.
So Tullio and Ben, I want to get your thoughts on this too, but so the solution that Mike had was, and I mentioned it, is to put some halides, over the tank, because that will have UV that can penetrate down to the corals, and that's also what Chris Meckley at ACI did, and so I don't know. Have you?
Depends on some factors. Depends on, because again, listen. One thing you guys know, I always call it straight. And the thing is that if it's not the right lamp, if it's not the right glass, there's so many factors where even a halide can produce little or no UV. And Rich, just to kind of Rich, are you familiar with you must be familiar with Ferguson indexes?
Not very, but I
Okay,
know.
you know, you have like what we call a UV index, like the weather people, you'll see the UV index and things like that. A lot of the measurements that I did were not only done with a spectrometer, but also using meters for like UV index, because I showed that how an LED, you can legally say that it has UVA, but the point is it's not active enough to produce, let's say, a UV index reading of X, because without the UVB and the other things like that, you only have a small portion of that. And that's where all of that kind of confusion, let's say, comes in. But it's pretty exciting stuff. But it's just, my feeling is that for the most part, the corals have been fine without the UV. And you know, I don't think, I just don't think there's too much to worry about, I guess, is a big deal. You know,
folks, thanks Blue Reef for the reminder. We got close to 110 people watching, only 25 likes. Let's get those likes up, people. Let's get those likes up so more people can find this stream. So Ben, man, you take care of a lot of tanks. I'm assuming that a lot of those tanks are LED lit. Have any of the tanks that you've seen with the LEDs you know, had any issues with RTN, STN over the long haul? I mean, have you like installed LEDs on a tank that maybe had halides before, different kind of lighting, and then saw something happen with the corals not loving it?
Man, the last time I messed with LEDs, and for years and years I was a double-ended guy and not local-based type guy.
Do you mean halides or LEDs?
Long time ago.
Halides, right? Not LEDs.
Yeah, metal halide. But also, Tullio, let me ask you a question. When on LED systems, you know, and they have UV channels, is that hardcore UV, or is it one of those things where it's not that great?
Rich, you got it on the no, it's not hardcore UV per se. I guess it more sounds cool than anything else, but no, it's not hardcore UV.
My understanding was something I read, and I can't remember where I read it, was that the LEDs we use, and I'm going to make up numbers because I'm not going to get them right, they're like 400 to 410. And UV is smaller than that, but the range that we call UV overlaps that a little bit. So again, it comes down to what do you mean by UV?
And I can't possibly keep this subject because I mean, I get squirmy when we're just saying words. This and this, you know, sounds great. And hey, I bet you it's this. And I'm just, you know, call me, you know, I'm not trying to be negative, but it's just until some decent testing gets done on these issues, it's just saying words.
Right.
Ben, it sounds like you're getting tasered. I'm hearing a tasing sound.
I don't know.
That's his
dead body on.
Go ahead, Rich.
The corals that are exposed at low tide, it's usually on the king tides or it's right on a fringing reef, you know, right at the drop. They put out a ton of mucus to protect themselves. So I would really need to be convinced that any of the sunlight that gets to them actually has any biocidal effect through that mucus. And for me, that it shows how these things build up, you know, and I'm working on something about algae growth in tanks about this as well. We have an idea that makes some kind of sense in our heads. UV, we're missing UV and I'm getting RTN. So maybe those are connected and that idea makes some kind of sense. What we often don't get in our hobby is following up to see if it actually makes sense or not. You know, there's a million good ideas in our heads that seem like they should work out, but when you put them into into reality, it just doesn't work that way for a million different reasons. So yeah, the exposed corals are not just there baking. The corals are actually dying. They're having a really bad time. They don't want to be exposed, and they have a huge metabolic drain in producing that mucus to be able to be exposed. And the ones that get exposed regularly or more regularly are, they're in a battle zone. They're fighting for their life the whole time, being exposed and not exposed. It's right in that zone that gets exposed is a harsh place to live. And if you're ever out on a wild reef that has that kind of zone and you'll walk it, you'll see immediately what I mean. They start to die off and they don't look good and they only grow a little bit. And as you get a little bit deeper where they stay more submerged, all of a sudden they look way healthier. So,
I mean,
so
it's like looking at trees on the mountain, and there's like a certain tree zone where, the tree is there, but it's all gnarled and is not an optimum condition for it.
Sure.
Let me just say thanks to Rogue Aquariums for that super chat. Thank you very much. And also to I guess an anonymous donor. The message there is Ben, Rich, Keith, Tullio, stay rad, smash the like button. I don't know, is that Snowman perhaps that's making that?
I want to jump on with, I think the most important thing about these changes is what's becoming clearer to me as time goes on. Our system really complex. There are complex intertwining of different webs, and changing anything in that web can have an effect. So, with Chris at ACI, and I need to meet Chris. I have not met Chris in person. Chris changes the UV, puts halides on it. That changes a lot of things besides just UV. So it could have, there could be a million things that are having that effect that you changed when you made that change. And again, and I don't want to be like, no. But I think in our hobby, we need more support for what you started saying, Keith, with ideas that are like primary ideas. Like we need more UV.
Yeah. And in Chris's case from ACI, though, there was this black algae, whatever you want to call it, that we were able to deal with when he switched it to that. But again, like I said, Rich, my main thing is this is something we're studying, and I don't want to jump from studying to conclusions, because then we can miss all the exciting stuff along the way.
Yeah. And also, I'll say this. When LEDs first came out, even before LEDs, when you had halides, when you were changing to a different halide, it really sucked. Bad things happened when that happened, unless you were very careful about the switch, because it's just different. You've taken a coral that's acclimated to a situation and you've changed it. I used to say the thing I hated most about reef keeping was changing halide bulbs, because it was stressful and you needed to, and my way of dealing with it was to really change to really acclimate them in slowly over like 3 weeks. And then changing from halides to LEDs, really the only thing that got me to do it is I wiped out my SPS with a Kalk overdose. And it was like, now's the time to make, the LEDs are good enough now, clearly, but now's the time to make the change because I'm not risking everything. Right. So changing a parameter matters.
Right.
Tullio, I'm just curious, have you talked to Mike since he added halides to his LED lit tank?
Oh, yeah. And he's only been running them a few hours a day because he was trying to like work them into the system. But, the main thing is there's been no change in temperature to his system, and he's running 3 of them. He is running 3 of them. There's been no change in temperature. They're using about the same power as let's say, the equivalent light source. I guess that's one of the interesting things that I was able to derive out of a lot of the testing at not only the Biosphere, but even ACI, how we've been able to demonstrate that in terms of actual, what I call relative energy or absolute irradiance, the disparity between the 2 light sources is actually not, not what we've been led to believe. But again, it's not saying that one's better than the other. LEDs, of course, are an awesome tool. They're very convenient to use. So there's that. It's just, we don't want to, I hate absolutes, and I don't want to take this UV thing and start running wild with it. And before we know it, I got guys with reptile bulbs on their reef tanks burning corals.
It's happening.
And all the selling sites.
And it'd be all Ben's fault.
Jason Langer said that the focusing on the 1% is a bane in this hobby. Many hobbyists chase numbers that may not have any substantial results. I think that's really interesting, because in a lot of these talks, and at like MACTA talks and in articles, we are talking about the edge. We are talking about the 5% edge of the hobby. This idea that can we get numbers that show that UV can make a positive difference for RTN or STN? That is a flippin' wonderful thing to chase. For 98% of people who are keeping corals, it is something they should completely ignore, or just like read on the Sunday and go, oh, that's interesting, and put that down and then go back to keeping their tank. This is nut stuff. This is nut edge stuff that it's good people are working on, but I don't think we should all ingest it as a hobby change. And I'm not quite sure how to make that not percolate into the rest of the hobby.
Right.
Yeah, this is something that like 200 people need to concentrate on, and the rest of people just need to read the articles.
Yeah, I mean, there are just so many different topics to get into in terms of how you can just get caught up in the minutia of this hobby, and I think that that's something that we've seen a lot of. I mean, I've seen it over the years in terms of like it's just gotten a lot more complicated, this hobby. There's just so many different products out there, additives, different types of equipment, and there's many different ways to run a reef tank. But I think sometimes we kind of get caught up in the craziness and the hype, and it's just you've got 20 different balls in the air, and sometimes you're losing sight of the the main purpose, which is just to keep the eyeballs on the tank and look at the health of your critters and your animals in the tank, and don't keep reacting to a lot of data and a lot of numbers.
Yeah, don't change. If your tank look good, just it's my fear with ICP testing as well. Which let's not get into the weeds on that, but it's you get stop it, Richard. You get your ICP, everything's fine, and you send out an ICP test just to check, and it comes up with some parameter that's high. Please don't make major changes to your reef. It's doing fine.
I was talking to somebody that go ahead.
Oh, that's it. Go ahead.
I was talking to somebody that was just absolutely obsessing about alkalinity. I mean, alkalinity is very, very important, but this hobbyist was just so obsessed with trying to like get in to within 0.5 DKH points of his target, and I was like, listen, I think that it's great to have a target range, but don't throw everything but the kitchen sink at that issue to try to solve that problem. You want to avoid the massive swings, but if you're off by 1 DKH over a week, don't lose any sleep over it.
Well,
Exactly.
Sounds like a hobby inside of a hobby.
It's funny. So I was just at Also. Again, it's a great show. Obviously the equipment is at a completely different scale. But the point is, Rich, this because even with Steinhardt and all the stuff you've done, is that even the best equipment out there, these probes have variances of plus or minus 3%, even 5%. And that's not even factoring in all of the other possible variables. So that whole 0.5 thing, I hate to say it, guys, is complete BS, because when you look at all of the variables, it's impossible. It's impossible.
I mean, like 7 years ago, 5 years ago, whatever it was, I was using a hobby grade test kit for alkalinity and testing once a week. I mean, yeah, now granted I'm testing twice a week, but I try to like just, keep my eye on a potential trend. if it's going a certain direction. But I think most of us in this hobby have pretty much leaned on hobby grade test kits for many, many, many years and had a lot of success. So sometimes I think you could really get too into the weeds and go overboard with this stuff.
Yeah, I don't do much to my tanks. I look at them. I get numbers sometimes. They look pretty good. I'm okay as long as everything's looking all right. But I think the key is the observation of the animals. The other day I was looking at the tank and I went, "What is wrong with that echinata? Something's not right." And I looked at it and it was pale. And I went, something's not right. So I pulled out the 6 times glasses and the flashlight, and I go, I bet you it's red bugs on that one piece, because I've been through that enough times to recognize it now instead of just think the coral is paling out. And it was red bugs, and I dosed the tank, and the coral's back. But there's no reason for me to do anything drastic. The problem I think comes is when people don't see something when it's small. Yeah. And then it grows out, and then by the time they see it, then it's like, now it's an emergency, but it's not really. So don't go crazy, just fix it. Don't go insane. And the other part that I want to just tap on that Tullio was saying was that there's a million parameters in our tank, and they're all interlinked. They all affect each other. We don't know how, but they do. So changing one of them could have good outcome or could have terrible outcome. So, the adage of nothing good happens fast, I think is true. Go slow, look at your animals, have a game plan in your head, and make changes based on advice from people whose tanks you respect, not from people you respect.
Oh, look, Ben made it home.
Hey, Ben's home.
So Zenith Reef Keeping, I hate when people lose their shit for cyano. Then you ask how old their tank is, and they say 3 months. Yeah, I think it's so true. I think that I got some cyano in one of my tanks. I don't care. It's not a big problem to me. I got some bubble algae in another tank. I don't care. I'm not going to be throwing a whole bunch of chemicals in there to try to get rid of the bubble algae. I think there's just some pests that are you can certainly manage, and there's other kind of pests that maybe you have to take more drastic action. So guys, let's get back onto another lighting topic, and this is also a much debated topic, and some people feel like it's not even a topic that needs to be debated at this point in time. And I'm talking about the difference between metal halides and LEDs, and which ones are the best for growing corals, namely SPS. So you get a lot of strong opinions out there, and there are some really respected folks in the industry who do feel that halides have the leg up or the edge on LEDs in terms of growing and coloring up SPS. And I think, maybe if not for the heat issue, you might have more people that would be sticking with halides, or maybe going to halides versus LEDs. I'm not sure I buy the electricity argument in terms of, the reason why you want to switch them halides to LEDs, because you're going to save electricity, right, Tullio? I mean, you're pretty much cranking out the same kind of wattage, no matter what.
Sanjay says a photon's a photon, and guess what, guys? A watt is a watt. A 215 watt radion is the same exact thing as a 250 watt halide. Let's say you're talking 30 watts either way, and watts are watts and photons are photons, kind of thing.
Hey, well, we got Tullio here. Tullio, so part of my decision to move to LED it wasn't the electricity, it was the 5-year life of the fixture, as opposed to changing my bulbs, my halide bulbs, every 8 months or 15 months, depending on how conservative I want to be, and dealing with the mercury from that and stuff like that, right? I don't actually know how LEDs stack up on that side of mercury and basic resources to create them. So, do you have any feel for, is that 5-year lifespan on one of the fixtures better or worse for the planet than, changing your bulbs, your LEDs, your metal halides 6 times over the same time period?
Right. And it's for example, many of the LED fixtures, they need to be completely replaced. They do need to be replaced.
Yeah.
So there's the whole landfill thing. My thing with halides, my biggest thing with halides is that for the most part, corals are fine with LEDs, but I am working with animals right now that these mercury vapor sources are the only way to generate the necessary energy levels we need for the welfare of the animals. And that was the workshop with also Rich and some of the public aquariums and zoos stuff. So for animal welfare and animal wellness, sea turtles, penguins, we've shown the benefit of mercury vapor sources. So what we've been trying to do is say, hey, if we save energy here, we can offset that carbon. You know what I mean? Again, it's not an absolute thing, because there still are things that metal halides are excellent options for, including some aquatic animals. We've seen certain sea anemones and other things like that that just respond well. Again, certain animals, it's not an absolute thing, but there are well-known people that are still running successfully halide systems, with a lot of these animals.
Tullio, how?
This
Go ahead.
Go. Somebody else besides me. Go
Go,
ahead.
Ben. You got pizza in
I
his
haven't
mouth.
talked at all.
Ben's like, I'm eating. I don't care.
No, man, I've been like driving this whole time.
Somebody asked whether Ben just ended up at somebody's ended up at a random house and somebody just gave him pizza and a beer.
Yeah,
Oh,
people love
yeah.
me. It's a beefer. I just drove to a beefer's house. And these aren't my kids. No, but so Tullio, you said with the halides, like marine mammals and reptiles, but also is that because of the depth, or you're not even talking about a depth of water thing, even just that the ultraviolet rays, the simulation of sun ultraviolet rays is good for like on a reptile, like on the turtle, like vitamin D3 synthesis and all
Scientifically, it's actually a term. It's called photobiomodulation. And that sounds pretty cool, right? So photobiomodulation. And yes, there's some of that, although interestingly enough, at the biosphere, and I think I demonstrated or talked about the data on one of the other talks, in that when we took 1,000-watt halide and we took the equivalent LED replacement, and it didn't matter what the brand was or anything else like that, interestingly enough, even in terms of PPFD at depth, the halide kind of did eke out the LED a little bit, but these light sources produce light differently. Exactly. We're talking semantics. Where the big differences seem to be is the spectral composition. And we will be releasing that data with more tests that we're doing with Chris from ACI. But Rich, here's the interesting thing, because again, guys, Rich, you've known me for a long time. One thing I can confidently say is I've always called it as I see it, right, Rich? I don't make stuff up. And as long as you've known me, Rich, some 20 years almost, I've been working with LEDs, right? That was that's actually how I came into the industry, was LEDs. Yeah. So my point is, why am I still talking about halides? That's the interesting. LEDs are awesome. Again, it's back to I don't want that absolute thing, because once we get rid of, like, let's say T5s are gone, if LEDs are all we have, then we have no other lighting options.
What were you? Were you saying something, Ben? No, you're just eating
honey so people would wake up. I ended up just
flatulating or something.
And everyone ignored me, which is basically what happens. No, why am I still talking about halides? And it's because you have a warehouse full of them. You got to offload them.
Of course, I got to sell this stuff to somebody, right?
So, Chris at ACI is.
Mark Levinson will only have so many.
So, Tullio, Chris at ACI is saying, asking, isn't an LED a mini strobe light? How do we know animals don't react to it differently?
Well, that would be for the animal guys. So, for example, there are things like PAM fluorometers that I know Dana Riddle is very familiar with. And in fact, it depends on how and Chris, I love you, by the way, brother. How you doing? I know where Chris is going with this. And I also demonstrated this is that when many LEDs are being dimmed, they're using basically pulse width modulation. And if you viewed it through certain types of cameras, you would absolutely see a strobing effect. And I'm sure we've all witnessed this at one point, trying to take a video with our phones or cameras where the phone was at a certain setting and you've seen that whole strobing effect. So there is that, and what that effect is, it's hard to say.
Yeah, but that, so one of the things we have in this hobby is what I call the million monkeys, and that's usually how we get our data in the hobby. Most of our data is from a bunch of people trying it and letting other people know what happened when they tried it, and then some kind of consensus forming, right? So I remember the strobing effect of LEDs being something everyone was concerned about in 2006, 2007, when we were all, soldering our own LED systems just for actinic, because Vita twists were a fire hazard with the end caps, right? And so everyone was worried about that. So many successes with tanks running LEDs, and it's hard to say that they're causing a problem. Could they be? Sure. The next question is, how much of a problem are they causing? It's like the same thing with when you talk about high phosphate is supposed to make your coral skeletons less dense and make them grow more slowly. How much less dense and how much more slowly? And do you care? If it's not actually hurting the animal, 50% less growth and 50% less dense skeleton is not going to matter for the bulk, the 90%, 95% of hobbyists. It's not.
So I have a question for you guys, and so I'm like an old school metal halide guy. That I've always been advocating metal halides, and a couple of years ago, a year and a half ago, whatever it was, I put LEDs on a reef tank for the first time ever, and I've been getting some great results with those. I'm using the GHL Mitras lights on my my Peninsula tank. Ben's outside again, and so
Away from my kid.
It's got to hide the body.
I picked up the dead body from the highway.
That's good. Cover your tracks. But I've been really having very good success with the LEDs on this Peninsula tank. So I'm running two different systems. I got one system with the LEDs, and I got another system, both SPS dominant, with the metal halides and the T5s. And I think I'm getting better growth at this point on my LED tank. But I think there's a couple of reasons why, and I want to get everybody's input in terms of what you think about this. But one is the PAR on the LED lit tank is higher than it is on my halide lit tank, and the other reason is that the pH tends to run a little bit higher on the LED tank versus the halide tank. So does that make sense? Would that be two good reasons why I'm potentially seeing better growth in the LED lit tank versus the halide tank? And is pH more of a driver than we think?
I've gone first too much.
What's that?
I've gone first too much.
Oh, okay.
I'm waiting. Don't want to be a hog.
Since I've barely talked, let me put just a little thing in here before Tullio goes off on a multi-chapter. No, but I'm saying, I guess my little piece is, sometimes I wonder, obviously we all want growth in our reef tanks, but I wonder sometimes it's like we aimlessly strive for growth. Now, if you're Chris Meckley at ACI, well, yeah, you're selling corals. You want growth. That's what you do. You push all the levers forward for growth. As a hobbyist, I'm not saying don't worry about growth, but I'm like,
it's just a question. Why the hell are we so obsessed about growth at home?
Yeah, and you talk to people who have been in it more than 10 years. They're like, slow my growth down. I'll be so happy.
Yeah.
Tullio?
I'm worried about vibration and health and all that.
I guess you answered Keith's question. Next.
So Tullio, how important is PAR in the whole equation?
Here's the thing. The pH and all of that. And by the way, there is a light pH correlation. I believe I talked about that in one of my talks. But, it's not. So, for example, how many hours a day you're running the halides versus the LEDs? We have daily light integral. So, for example, it's like an energy constant. So it's not just, hey, I'm using halides in this tank and LEDs on this tank, and because the PAR is higher here, because chances are you're using a shorter photo period on the halides, I would assume. You might only be running those 6 or 8 hours a day. The LEDs, you may be possibly running those 12 hours a day. So you could actually have a different daily light integral. There's so many other factors. It's not just halide or let's say LED. Because again, even Chris Meckley can tell you when we were at ACI measuring PPFD, depending on the light source and so many other factors, we were seeing the opposite in some cases.
I mean, why not use like on a tall exhibit? Why not use halide and LED together and have LED be the actinic and do the ramp up and ramp down, and have halide be the strong stretch of 4 to 6 hours, whatever.
I believe. Go ahead, Rich.
That's what I did with my tank at home for years. At first it was literally, they stopped making the Vita twist. So it was literally actinic fluorescence. And I remember getting, the IceCap end caps, the waterproof end caps, and putting them together in the front and, dreading the day when I was next going to come home to that smell of them burning, because it was only a matter of time. And then that switched to, I think the first LED strips I used were yours, Tullio.
Yep.
And they were a great replacement for that. But Keith, what did your pH change by?
So on the LED tank, that pH is like ranging from 8.3 to 8.5. Okay, and on the halide tank, it's maybe like 8.1 to 8.3, sometimes 8.4. Not that big of a difference, but I mean, 0.2 pH points, I guess, is pretty significant. If you're
that's a lot. It's not a linear scale, so 2 pH points is a lot. Yeah. But you're still in the range, and it's hard to say if it matters. So this is what I've been telling people lately. Look, if you are growing coral as a business, you want to maximize everything that's supposed to help, is generally what I would say. You want your pH to be up. You want to do the lights in the way that you think are going to accelerate your growth. You want to do all those things. You want to make your pH, your light, you want to make sure your phosphates are lower and your nitrates. You don't want to take any chances, right? But if you're not doing that, it just doesn't seem to make much of a difference to most people. You can grow corals fine at 7.9 pH. You can grow corals fine at 8.1. And then again, all those things are interrelated. They all work off each other. You need your alkalinity and your pH and your calcium to be in that balance that only Craig Bingman understands. It's that crazy balance that's not easy to get and not easy to keep. So yeah, I could see higher pH making a difference. But then again, I want to know what the difference is. They look better, sure. They grow faster, how much? As Ben likes to say, is the juice worth the squeeze? And I think that's a lot of what we need. I think that's what a lot of hobbyists need to bear in mind when they go crazy about, I want to up my pH and I'm going to spend $500 on a CO2 scrubber and dedicate myself to the work that scrubber is going to take. It's like, is it worth it for you to get that? What are you doing that it matters that much?
I don't know why I think this way, but a lot of times I think in metaphors. But it's like this whole industry is doing things with cars, and some of us are drag racing, some of us are going to the grocery store. So this lady going to the grocery store is like, do I need a nitrous bottle to go to the grocery store? No, you don't need a freaking nitrous bottle. Do I need a pickup truck to go to my friend's house down the street? I'm just thinking of this whole hobby like this. Like, you can't say that, the guy that's trying to push growth and he's obsessed with pH, and then a hobbyist reads that and they're like, oh my God, do I need to be obsessed with pH? I mean, you need to keep it up, but you don't need to push all those levers as far forward as possible, because you stop and ask yourself, what the hell are you driving yourself crazy with that?
So Chris is.
It's funny.
Go ahead, Rich.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Chris is disagreeing with you, Ben.
Okay, that's awesome. Let's fight. Let's hear it, Chris.
He'll type out why he's disagreeing. I think he's only disagreeing with you because he wants your pizza.
You're gonna have to pry it out of my belly. You can wait a couple hours.
What you guys are just talking about is, I'm thinking about the pH issue, and I've always generally told people, don't worry about pH. And now that's coming around and people are like, no, Rich, you should worry about the pH. And the problem in that conversation is the generality about it. The reason I say don't worry about pH is because most of the time it doesn't matter. And unless you can fix it by bubbling outside air into your tank, it can be really hard to upkeep pH. If you start running Kalk, and generally we're talking to people who are a couple of years in the hobby. And I balk at those people running Kalkwasser into their tanks because it's so easy to kill your tank with Kalkwasser. So, if you don't have a compelling reason to want to jack your pH up, and it's going to cost you time and money and energy, don't do it. If, like me, I moved into the house, I want to maximize that. My crawl space is under the house where my sump is. It was trivially nothing to run an air pump that I have laying around to bubble outside air right into the sump. If it's that easy, go for it. Absolutely. If it's not that easy, slow down and think about if it actually matters to what you're doing.
Chris is actually booing you. He says, oh, you need to get Rich and I on, Keith.
Awesome.
No, they need to get boxing gloves. Get in a celebrity.
Awesome.
All right, let's switch gears slightly here. And go ahead, Rich.
I would bet you that Chris and I agree on much more. And I think a conversation. That's why I want to meet him. I want to have a conversation like this with him, because I think we miss each other and where we're disagreeing more than we do when we agree.
Yeah,
But it's fun to disagree, so he's all excited.
He will probably smack me. I'll be as Chris Rock to his Will Smith.
He's gonna... You better get alopecia real quick.
Hey, that's too far, Ben. I was making a joke about the men, not about a medical condition.
I live too far.
All right, so let's switch gears a little bit here, and this is still, I guess, kind of related to lighting. And Ben and Rich, you guys talked about this on one of your Reef Beef podcasts, and this is about the tendency of some coral vendors to oversaturate their pictures to help sell corals. So I'm going to show a picture of a frag, and I'm not going to name where this frag was, who was selling this frag. You can see the egg crate is blue, right? So
Ben Johnson.
So that's the first thing that kind of stands out in terms of that oversaturation, and that is that really what a that frag is going to look like in somebody's tank when they hit it with more full spectrum lighting. So that's one thing. And the other thing here is this is like a multifaceted topic here in terms of this picture, because I don't know, I'm counting about 12 to 15 polyps on this thing. I think the frag appears to be about a half an inch tall, and this thing was originally listed for $1,000 and it was on sale for $800. What what is going on here? There's just so much to talk about here, and you know, I think you know, you guys certainly had a great discussion about it on your Reef Beef podcast. But what the heck, man? What is happening to this hobby? You know,
Keith, I just recently did this.
This is like a multi.
I recently did this. So a client contacted me, and I'm not going to name names because, again, I don't want to drag anyone through the mud. And for all I know, this is a person that watches this program. But so one of my clients like, hey, I saw in a magazine, in a hobbyist magazine, so that narrows it down there because there's not very many. But he's like, I saw this real cool zoanthid. And so I was like, I looked at the picture, and it's a super, I don't know if it was in the magazine or just the digital version of the magazine. And it was like an ad for these zoanthids that were crazy color. And I was like, man, I don't know. I sort of doubt they look like that. And he's like, you know, he's super rich customer. He's like, go ahead and get them, you know, and I'll get them. So I ordered 4 of them, and they look nothing like the picture. Of course, my client paid for them, and, you know, I recouped the money, but I broke even. But it was like, you know, the picture for them was deep blue, like navy deep blue, and they came in barely blue, and I don't know what happened. Okay. And that, you know, and I told the seller, and he was, you know, apologetic, and yeah, I know how that feels too. You know, your pride gets stung, but I don't know what happened. I don't really believe that they changed color in transit, and they certainly didn't look like the picture. I mean, this stuff even happens to me.
you know, it's just I don't know.
$100 a piece, $100 a polyp.
How is that? I mean, that's a zoanthid, right? So I guess a zoanthid is going to be a lot hardier than an SPS, right? But if you have that small of a frag with an SPS and you got 10 or 15 polyps in that SPS, I mean, what are the chances of that thing actually going to grow into a a 1-inch frag by within a year or two? I mean, it's just crazy to me. And just in terms of the representation and the prices, I think things have just gotten quite out of hand on a number of fronts, and it's a problem. You know, I think a lot of people say that some of the newer people that are coming into the hobby just don't know any better, and maybe that's true. But I think there's also veteran reef keepers that might get caught up in this stuff. It's tough. It's difficult. It really is.
I guess, I'm not on the coral side of things, but there's any number of reasons, one, why the corals would look different. I mean, I've always laughed about this for years. People will go to even if it's a pet store, and buy a coral and bring it home and put it in their tank, and then wonder why after a few days the coral looks different. And it's like, well, did you look at the lighting they were using at the pet store? Did you consider, what the coral was kept under, some of these other things? And then on the other side of it, what's also, I guess I question is, you see people spending $100 a polyp or $800 or $1,000 on a coral, and then they're trying to cut corners on critical equipment like pumps and other equipment like that. And it's like, oh, I'll use that $20 Chinese pump to keep, my $10,000 worth of corals alive. It just doesn't make sense.
To a picture like what you're showing us, my response is I don't have macro eyes.
So
I don't, and I started saying that when people started taking pictures like that 10, 12 years ago, when somebody at reefs.org wrote a thing about the problem with digital cameras and cameras in general, that none of the images coming out of our cameras are natural. They're just not. That's not how cameras work. But I'm rarely looking at my tank from right here. I'm usually sitting back here. So that's and tiny frags, some people dig them. I guess the challenge of growing them out. I'm a little worried that they've become the de facto for too many people. You don't have to get little frags like that. You can get bigger pieces of different corals. And I also think you should be buying coral that you like, not coral that other people seem to think is important.
So, Rich, you said something that I thought was very interesting on one of your Reef Beef podcasts, and that is create a trade organization. that vendors can be a part of, and essentially, have a stamp that says that they're not lying or being, they're not misrepresenting the animals that they're selling.
Yeah, well, we've been in need of a trade organization since the last one died, in my opinion, and it's just going to be hard to make happen. There's a few people working on it now very hard. There's a group called the aquariumtrade.org. That's following up on some of this LACIAC stuff, and it's trying to get some motion going in that area. That's really hard. A lot of people in our trade don't want it to happen. And it's because of the interconnectivity of vendors in the trade, it is very hard to say, hey, that's a bad player. They're doing things in a bad way. It's just the reality is it's just hard to do that. So a trade organization, I think, is critical to the survival of the hobby long term, because right now we can't defend ourselves. We just get smacked from the outside and then react. And the Pet Advocacy Network can only do so much. So I don't know if that's going to happen, but I think it would be great. Chris asks, who is part of that organization? It's not really off the ground, Chris, but if you want to know more, I will send you a message somehow.
So I'm just looking at a couple of more of the comments here. All right. So another thing I wanted to talk to you guys about is something that, and I'm just kind of bouncing around here a little bit. And folks, if you have any other questions, please drop them in the chat. We'll try to get to them. But one thing that a lot of people do to combat problematic algae is do a 3 to 5 day tank blackout, right? And so the theory is that the corals can survive that because in the wild there are storms, right? And there could be no light from the sun for a few days on our natural reefs, and corals are kind of used to that sort of thing. But I don't know. It seems like a lot of people do these blackouts. I did a couple a number of years ago, and everything. I think I lost a clam and I lost a couple of frags, but things just didn't look great. After that 3 full day blackout. I'm curious, Rich, what you have to say about that sort of practice in terms of blacking out a tank to try to rid it of an algae issue. Is it worth it?
It depends on the algae. I've done it for dinos and cyano, neither of which are algae, but people tend to keep those lumped in the same kind of area. You can have problems, and it depends on your system. I've done it a few times where it seemed like there was some issue. The corals looked a little unhappy after I usually do 5 days, which is a long time. And I did it recently on 2 of my tanks for 5 days and not even a blip. The cyano went away in both of them. It came back in one of them in about a week or 2 weeks, and is now gone again because I've done various different things. So I think I also don't totally black them out. I don't put it's not like what we think is going on with coral spawning when any light pollution will ruin everything. They need enough light. The 2 pests I talked about need enough light to grow. Having room light on in there doesn't seem to give them enough of anything anyway. So you can kind of keep track on what's going on. Also, it makes it easier to feed the tank during that time. Don't be scared to turn on the lights for a few minutes to check on everything. But I've seen the blackout be really effective. If your tank is shaky, well, I say that my system's 20 years old, right? It's pretty established. On a 6-month-old tank, I don't know what's going to be happening if you block out the light. If the corals are going to be able to deal with it or not.
Ben, is that something you do every so often?
Hell no.
No.
No, I mean, I was listening to you, and the bunch of different things are going through my head. One thing was like, if you've got a problem to bring on that sort of algae and you just black the tank out, like who's to say that it doesn't come right back. But then I stopped myself and I was thinking like, well, what if you bought, I mean, because it's as crazy as this. What if you bought some new corals and it's just some freaking spores, you know, on the plug, and that's all you did? I mean, your aquarium was running fine. It's just you brought some dino spores on a plug, and then all of a sudden you're plagued with it. So it's not necessarily something you caused or created of bad maintenance or bad equipment or anything like that. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's something that you could employ. I just worry about stressing the corals more. Sort of a 30,000 foot view here of what's crazy is think about that dinoflagellates and photosynthetic bacteria and algae have been on the planet far longer than corals. And so that's the problem I have sometimes in my head with, like, you think like, oh, I'm going to do this to this algae. Dude, algae has been fighting this battle for way longer than corals have. So like limiting nutrients and, oh, I'm going to limit nitrate and phosphates and I'm going to take care of my algae problem. Dude, nitrate will bring, I mean, algae can go way down further. You'll kill your corals before you'll kill the algae. And I just, you know, all these things to like try to combat algae by making an adverse condition for corals. You know, algae play this game. Algae will laugh at you.
Algae doesn't suck at life. Coral sucks at life.
Yeah.
Those are some interesting thoughts. All right, here's another question for you guys. And again, folks, if you have any questions you want to drop in the chat, go for it. I'm just bouncing around here. Let's look out into the future. I want to get you know, each of your guys' opinion in terms of you know, 5 years from now. What do you think we're going to be seeing in terms of the future of the hobby? Any predictions? Ben.
This is I don't have any hard information or anything like that, but what are you laughing at?
I think he knows what's coming.
No, I mean, okay, so here's a serious one. I sort of think, and this is just in my head, unformed. I don't have any hard information that no one else has, but it's like all this aquabiomic stuff and stuff with understanding the better strains of bacteria and the bad strains of bacteria and understanding that better, and then making that stuff, making aquabiomic stuff like actionable, seems like it could be a big part of the puzzle. Because we just say beneficial bacteria, but I don't, you know, I barely know what that means. Or like, oh, you had sort of like gut health, like your gut health. You know, like their medical science is like, that's a hot spot right now of them studying like the good bacteria that are in your gut, what happens bacteria proliferate. So I mean, understanding the bad strains of bacteria that could grow in your reef tank, and then having something actionable to do something about that.
Yeah, I mean, that's another thing. We're, you know, we've talked about this before on the stream, but, you know, a lot of people are dosing bacteria, including myself. And, you know, is there any hard information behind whether or not that actually is necessary?
Yeah, I mean, it might be sketchy at this point, but then 5 years from now, when we've defined and refined that situation, it might be a game changer. I mean, I don't know. Like, you know, would know the specific strains for, like, I mean, we sort of do that now, even though I think a lot of it is marketing bullshit. But like, oh, you have a dino problem, we'll put this other dino flagellate in the tank that outcompetes these bad dinos, or, you know, stuff like that. You could then we'd really piss off Richard, because then you'd really be doing magic in a bottle. But if we could uncover that magic and get the Wizard of Oz out from behind that, you know,
screen.
Pay no attention to this man. You know, if we cover that and pull the mystery out of it, and it's like, oh, you have too many organics. Well, these couple strains of beneficial bacteria, you know, and like I said, I think we already sort of do that. It's just that no one's really defining that super well.
I think, yeah, it's still early with that. So I think all indications are that will become a really useful tool, and hopefully sooner than later. But
That's
besides,
what I said about.
See, that's another reason to
Yeah.
have a trade organization, Rich, right? Because you've got companies out there that are trying to fill that void in terms of bacteria testing, and is there any checks and balances in terms of the methodology that's being employed for that? Is there any checks and balances for other companies out there that have products that they might not be forthcoming in terms of what kind of ingredients are in the bottle? Is that another reason to have a trade organization?
absolutely.
I mean, I throw up in my mouth a little bit, because some of the stuff that happens in our industry, you get marketing people just being like, "Oh, cool, that's a thing we can make money on," and that's the part that I'm not in love with.
Right. I mean, but how do you know, all the ICP testing out there? How do you know, one company versus another if that one company is legit versus another company? I mean, it's just like the Wild West.
Throw your darts.
That's a hard one. That's really harsh. And when you send two ICP tests of the same water to the same place, you get different results. And so which one is actionable? And I think, I don't know, I think the aquabiome stuff, the microbiome stuff is going to, like I said, is going to end up being really, really useful. And I think it's just starting to be useful. And the next question is going to be, how do you, when everyone is dosing their tanks with Cipro or whatever, is that, which is a thing, is that ethical? What's the way to get rid of that water? How is that done? And if we can barely keep people, doing things on the up and up now, when we're throwing antibiotics all over the place, that could be an issue as well. So I think we need best practices built around that. And it would be great to have an organization that's, putting forward the best practices and supporting
I
them.
used to my prior life in the working world. I worked in the media business, and I used to we used to help clients understand the TV ratings and all that sort of thing. I was on the marketing research side. And there was a trade organization called the Media Ratings Council, and there was a lot of different companies out there that can measure audiences that consume different types of media. And this Media Ratings Council was an independent third party, and they did audits, and they accredited all these different rating companies in terms of their methodologies. And it would be great to see something similar in the reef keeping world.
Costs money.
Nielsen rating type stuff.
Some sort of governing body to help accredit the what companies are doing in terms of their methods and testing and that sort of thing. I think would certainly be helpful. But yeah, I think it's a money thing, and that's a tough thing that's a tough nut to crack, I would think.
I think as the hobby gets squeezed more from the outside, the utility of such an organization may become apparent to people it's not apparent to now. But I think in 5 years, is probably, everything comes in cycles, right? So Kalk slurry is a thing again now, and metal halides are a thing again now. I think we're going to see people peeing in their tank again in 5 years. I think that's
I just want to point out.
Who did that?
But hear me out. Everyone did that. But hear me out. In 2014 or whenever I gave that talk about phosphate, and I talked about the reason that nitrate used to be the devil because we could test for it and we felt like we could do something about it. In 2003, when GFO came out for our industry, we could test for phosphate, and all of a sudden we felt like we could do something about it. So phosphate became the devil. So that's what I was talking about then. And I said, watch, I will bet you within 10 years, we're going to see people dosing nitrate and phosphate. And got a big laugh because it seemed like the stupidest thing to say. And here it is. And so mark my words, urine in your tank. It's going to be the thing. That's what we're going to sell, Ben.
Well, I spent my whole career trying to reduce nitrate and phosphate, and then some. Oh, wait, this isn't Reef Beef. I was about to cuss.
Go ahead.
You already have.
Yeah, it's already happened.
me I got to add it back.
So you guys going to be selling a Reef Beef P? Is that what we're hearing?
We're already selling it, buddy.
Man, I've been saying, me and Sanjay have been talking for years, and I just talked with Raj about setting up a website for it, that if we were unscrupulous, if we didn't care, we could make so much money in this hobby. You know, we could just sell inoculant from proven tanks. I hate to even say that out loud because someone's probably going to do it and beat me to it.
Yeah.
But we're probably going to start a company.
And that's why you contacted Raj to orchestrate this?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we're going to start. The company's called It Could Work or It Might Work.
Yeah.
So we don't know. It might work. You should buy it, and we'll see how much we sell.
This coming from Raj, the guy that pounds a bottle of ranch dressing at a Magna.
Yeah. Tullio, what are you gonna see in 5 years? I like that.
We're illuminating our tanks with candlelight.
What did you say?
Yeah.
We're going to be illuminating our tanks with candlelight. That's going to be the next big craze. I'm telling you, invest in candles.
I got 5 candles, bro. No. You need 8 candles per gallon.
8? Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
I love
a new rule.
Skylights are come back too.
Yeah. All right, so, Tullio. In all seriousness, and don't say urine. What are you thinking in 5 years?
You know, honestly, I think in 5 years we're going to be talking about the same crap we're talking about right now.
You know what? We're going to be lucky if we're talking about the same crap, because we might be talking about, remember when we used to keep saltwater aquariums?
Yeah, and remember when Rich used to pee in his tank?
Yeah.
Used to.
And we're all going to be in the insurance business. I'm going to sell life insurance policies.
All right, guys, do you have anything else we want to talk about here tonight? I know I've been asking a lot of you guys. Ben was like, basically, I didn't even know we were able to get Ben onto the stream tonight because
that was crazy. I was in traffic most of the time.
He was driving through traffic and whatnot, and we couldn't connect with him on Skype. I mean, I thought it was hopeless, and then somehow we were able to like make the magic happen. But
it was baby Jesus made that happen.
I know Rich is out on the East Coast, and Tullio is doing his thing down in Florida. But guys, anything else we want to talk before we sign off tonight?
Ask the audience.
Yeah, any
ask Richard.
And besides whatever anything else that they got to, I really enjoy these conversations. This feels like being at a convention. It's really fun. So thank you for hosting these, Keith.
Well,
yes, thank you, Keith.
I want to thank you guys for reconvening. It's always a lot of fun chatting with you guys, and I always learn a lot, and I think we have a lot of fun doing it too. So yeah, this is all good. All right, so guys, you want to plug Reef Beef?
No. Just go.
Snowman's not going to like to hear that.
If you're, I don't give a crap. He's fired.
It's like the Primus sucks kind of advertising. You know what? We know the show is not for everybody. If you don't want to hear bad words and you don't want to hear about the socio-political side of reef keeping from time to time, don't listen to our podcast.
Oh, didn't you?
It's not for you.
Edge of y'all aren't gonna like it, so I just say go. Don't look at the first few because it's like that's some raw material. As if our later stuff isn't all that raw. But look at one of our later episodes, and if you can hang for the first 5 minutes, then that's okay.
So you guys have already surpassed the 1,000 subscribers. Weren't you guys going to do something after you hit that 1,000 mark?
I'm supposed to wear a spandex onesie.
That's at 1,700. We did something for 1,000. I don't remember what it was, but we did it.
Did a show under your crawl space in your John Wayne.
I did a show.
Crawl space.
I did a show from the crawl space. Yeah. And then something else is supposed to happen at 15 and 17 and something weird.
We wore capes.
We wore capes. That's right.
I don't know if we're like slowly easing into like jackass territory. Like at 2,000 subscribers, I'm going to hit my balls with a ball peen.
Oh, see,
Anything for viewers.
Oh my God, no. Thank you, Keith. We love doing the show. We love doing it on the terms that we think are useful. And we love doing it in a way that makes us feel like we're not just doing yet another reef show. It's got something. We're covering stuff. Besides covering reef stuff, we're covering the part of the reefing world that we also think is important. So thank you for letting us pimp ourselves.
Yeah, for sure.
Reef Beef sucks.
Sorry if we embarrass you.
See this hat? See this hat?
Gotta represent.
There we go.
Tullio, what about you, man? Reef Brite, what's the deal?
You know, listen, don't buy our lights. They suck. Okay, they really do. You do not want to buy our lights. They totally suck. But I do want to thank you. Yeah, I do want to thank you, Keith, for having me on. It's always fun getting on with Ben and Rich and you know just shooting the stuff.
I want to say something unsolicited. I just in the last 3 months I set up 3. I guess I would say just like a more simple reef tanks, and all 3 of them that I did Reef Brite XHO strips. One of them had 3 of them on it. One of them had 4 of them on it, and I shit you not, those things are far brighter than I thought they would be. Not that I don't have experience with XHOs, but putting like 4 of them above. Like a 5-foot tank.
You can put electrical tape on them and it'll make them less bright.
There you go.
I'll cover up every 3rd one.
Thanks to Chris at ACA Aquaculture for the super chat. There is there's a little animation of it looks like a dinosaur in an office chair with flames coming out of it. So I don't know exactly where that came from, but thanks, dude. Thanks, buddy. All right, guys, listen, thank you again so much for coming on the live stream. It was a lot of fun, and I think we all got a lot out of it. So thank you. I also want to thank the sponsors, both Bulk Reef Supply and Ecotech Marine, for supporting the show, and also for you folks out there tuning in and participating via the chat as well as the super chats. Thank you so much. And finally, a big thank you to Paul, who was the moderator once again. So I also want to remind you that all episodes of Rappin With ReefBum are also available as podcasts on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Stitcher. My next live stream will be on Thursday, April 21st at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with Jim Graham, also known as Telegram on Instagram and YouTube. He was on before. Should be another great show. I think we're going to talk about some gadgets, including the GHL Ion Director, which he has. And I'm keeping my just can't wait to get my hands on one. Anyway, the full upcoming schedule of guests, you can check that out on reefbum.com under the YouTube section. So until then, everybody out there, be safe and be well, and we will see you next time. Adios.